The moment I opened the bedroom door, I knew I had crossed a line I could never uncross. My roommate, Brielle, stood near the window with her back turned, struggling to fasten the clasp of a pale blue dress, and when she suddenly looked over her shoulder and saw me, the color drained from her face. I froze, immediately realizing I had walked in without knocking. But what happened next shocked me even more. She didn't scream or demand that I leave. Instead, with tears already gathering in her eyes, she whispered, "Help me finish. If you believe that kindness can appear in the most unexpected moments, that forgiveness can heal wounds we thought were permanent, and that everyone deserves hope and a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to our channel so you can stay with our family through more stories like this." My name is Callum Reed, and at the time, Brielle Hart and I had been sharing a small apartment for almost 8 months. We weren't best friends. We weren't enemies either. We were simply two people who had ended up under the same roof because rent in our city had become impossible for either of us to manage alone. Brielle was 28, fiercely independent, organized to the point of obsession, and usually carried herself with the confidence of someone who had learned early that depending on other people was dangerous. I was 31 and quieter, the kind of person who preferred fixing broken cabinet doors to discussing broken feelings. We had developed a careful routine. She left for work early. I worked from home. We shared groceries, divided bills, and occasionally watched old movies in the living room on Saturday afternoons. We knew each other's habits without really knowing each other's hearts. That morning had started normally. Sunlight poured through the kitchen blinds, turning the dust in the air golden. Brielle had mentioned that she needed to attend an important daytime charity luncheon connected to her workplace. She had been nervous about it for days because her manager had told her that several executives would be there, and Brielle hoped the event might lead to a promotion. She had been working toward that promotion for nearly 2 years. She had stayed late, taken extra assignments, and quietly accepted criticism from people who barely noticed how much work she did. That morning, however, she seemed different. She kept checking the clock and staring at the garment bag hanging from the back of her bedroom door as if the dress inside carried more weight than fabric should ever have to carry. I didn't ask questions. Brielle wasn't someone who liked being questioned when she was already anxious. Instead, I made coffee and left for the grocery store because we were out of milk. When I returned, I heard her moving around in her room. I was carrying 2 heavy grocery bags, and because my hands were full, I pushed her bedroom door open with my elbow without thinking. The door swung inward, and there she was. For a second, neither of us moved. Brielle had managed to pull the dress over herself, but the clasp at the back refused to cooperate. She was fully covered, but clearly embarrassed by the accidental intrusion. I immediately looked away and apologized, stepping backward. I expected anger. Instead, her voice stopped me. She told me she couldn't fasten the dress, her hands were shaking, and she had already been crying because she had received a message that morning that had destroyed her confidence. I turned around only after she told me it was okay. She explained that the dress had belonged to her mother. It was one of the last things her mother had worn before becoming seriously ill. Brielle had kept it packed away for years, afraid that wearing it would make the memories too painful. But that morning, she had decided to wear it because her mother had always told her never to shrink herself for people who failed to recognize her worth. Then Brielle showed me the message on her phone. Her manager had written that the promotion she had been promised was likely going to someone else. The reason was vague, but Brielle knew exactly what it meant. A colleague with better connections had been given the opportunity. She had spent years believing that if she worked hard enough, she could eventually outrun the disadvantages life had handed her. That morning, she felt as if all those years had meant nothing. I helped fasten the clasp, carefully and respectfully, and then stepped away. She looked at herself in the mirror and began crying again. Not because of the dress, she explained, but because she suddenly felt like she was standing in the exact place where her mother had once stood, trying to be brave while life quietly took something away from her. I didn't know what to say. So I told her the truth. Losing a promotion didn't mean she had lost her value. Being overlooked didn't mean she was insignificant. Sometimes people failed to recognize what was directly in front of them, and that failure belonged to them, not to the person they overlooked. She laughed through her tears and told me that sounded like something printed on a motivational calendar. I laughed too. It was the first time that morning she had smiled. Then she asked me something I wasn't prepared for. She asked why I always seemed to know what to say when someone else was falling apart but never talked about my own problems. I tried to dismiss the question, but Brielle had become unusually perceptive. She knew I had been avoiding calls from my father. She knew I had stopped visiting my hometown. She knew I had never explained why I had moved hundreds of miles away. I finally told her. My father and I had not spoken properly in nearly 3 years. After my mother died, he became bitter and withdrawn. We argued about everything, especially about the house she had left behind. I had wanted to sell it and divide everything fairly. He wanted to keep it because he couldn't bear the thought of losing the last physical reminder of her. Our arguments became cruel. Eventually, I said something unforgivable during one of them, something about how he was turning grief into an excuse to punish everyone around him. He told me never to come back. I had obeyed. Brielle sat on the edge of the bed and listened without interrupting. Then she said something that stayed with me for years. She told me that sometimes people didn't need to be completely innocent before they deserved forgiveness. Sometimes they simply needed to be brave enough to admit they had been wrong. That afternoon, Brielle went to the luncheon. I expected her to return devastated, but when she came home, she looked different. She had not received the promotion. Instead, she had confronted her manager respectfully and asked for a written explanation of the decision. She had also learned that several colleagues had been struggling with the same unfair treatment. For the first time, Brielle had stopped trying to survive quietly. She had decided to stand up for herself. A week later, she received an unexpected offer from another company. One of the executives at the luncheon had noticed her work and had asked her to interview for a position with better pay and genuine advancement opportunities. Brielle accepted the job. But her transformation didn't end there. She began encouraging me to contact my father. I resisted for weeks. I told her there was nothing to say. She told me that was exactly why I needed to say something. One Saturday afternoon, while sunlight filled the apartment, I finally called him. He answered after several rings. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I apologized. Not because I believed I had been entirely wrong, but because I knew the words I had used had wounded him. I told him I was sorry for turning 2 grieving people into enemies when we had both lost the same person. My father didn't immediately forgive me. That hurt. But he didn't hang up either. We spoke for nearly 40 minutes. By the end, he was crying. So was I. He told me he had been angry because he thought I was abandoning him, and I told him I had been angry because I thought he was blaming me for something neither of us could control. It wasn't a magical repair. We didn't suddenly become the perfect father and son. But it was a beginning. Months passed. Brielle became successful in her new position. She still had difficult days, still questioned herself, and still occasionally stared at her mother's old dress with tears in her eyes. But she no longer believed that strength meant carrying everything alone. And I began visiting my father again. One warm afternoon, Brielle came home carrying a small box. She placed it on the kitchen table and told me she had finally decided what she wanted to do with the dress. She wasn't going to keep it hidden anymore. She planned to donate it to a local theater program so someone else could wear it, stand confidently beneath bright lights, and perhaps feel the same courage her mother had once given her. I asked if she was sure. She smiled and said her mother had never wanted memories to become prisons. That sentence changed something inside me. A year after the day I accidentally walked into Brielle's room, we returned to the same charity organization where she had once felt humiliated and overlooked. This time, she was there as a guest speaker. She stood before a room full of young professionals and spoke about confidence, rejection, grief, and the importance of refusing to measure your worth by someone else's decision. I sat in the audience beside my father. Brielle saw us and smiled. After the speech, my father shook her hand and thanked her for something she hadn't realized she had done. He told her that without her encouragement, he wasn't sure his son would have ever called him. Brielle looked at me with tears in her eyes. I told her she had helped me finish something too. Not a dress. Not a speech. A conversation I had been afraid to begin for 3 years. She laughed softly, and we stood together beneath the afternoon sunlight while people moved around us, unaware of how much had changed. That day taught me that sometimes the most important moments in our lives don't arrive with dramatic announcements. Sometimes they begin with an unlocked door, an accidental mistake, a frightened person asking for a little help, and another person choosing kindness instead of embarrassment. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It simply stops the past from controlling the future. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. And before you go, leave a comment telling us this: what is one relationship in your life that deserves a second chance, even if the first step feels difficult? Because Brielle taught me something I'll never forget. People don't always need someone to rescue them. Sometimes they only need someone willing to stand beside them while they find the courage to rescue themselves. And sometimes, when we help someone else finish what they were too afraid to complete, we discover that we were quietly finishing something inside ourselves all along.